Hello everybody and welcome to another video. I hope once again that everybody's holding on because these are harsh, painful times. And needless to say, what happened, it's not just what happened, but because it's been going on, it's not new, it's nothing new. Um, but what happened was atrocious, it was cruel, and it was disgusting, and it once again managed to puke all over the childish, foolish, naive idea that I held once upon a time about what the US was supposed to stand for. Today we're talking about Kings Haki, otherwise known as Conquerors Haki or Hashoku Haki or King's Disposition Haki or the Haki of the Natural Born King. It has a bunch of names, really cool sounding names. But specifically I want to talk about it in relation to the Straw Hats that I think will have it by the end of the series. To me, those candidates are Zoro, Usopp, and Sanji. Those characters go way back. Remember, there's a scene in Arlong Park where Johnny and Yasuku have a speech about keep your eyes on those four men, including Luffy, but Luffy already has it. But keep your eyes on those four men because they're here to change destiny. I mean, talk about an epic way of foreshadowing their future role in the story with that walk to Arlong Park. Now, I'm not going to be talking about Jinbei here just because he barely just joined the crew officially, and so we haven't seen enough of him. But I will give him points. I will give him credit for being able to stand up against Big Mom and her stay or life technique and come out of that completely unfazed. Gotta give props to Jinbei for that. That shows a very strong, fixed will, not budging against a Yonko. And speaking of Big Mom, speaking of moms, I want to thank my dear mother for stepping up to the plate and volunteering to give me this haircut. Anyway, I'm going to start with Zoro because the way I'm doing this is I'm going to go from most likely to have it to least likely. So it's going to go Zoro, Usopp, and then Sanji. To be honest, Zoro is the most obvious pick out of the Straw Hats for him to have it in the future because we know that King's Haki is directly connected to the user's willpower and sense of conviction.
I mean, ever since he's been introduced, he's always been talking about his dream and how he's willing to risk everything, even his own life, to achieve it. He also has this really weird, intimidating aura that surrounds him at times that scares the crap out of people. Like that scene in Sabaody from episode 395 where he intimidates a pack of goons with his glare alone, or that scene in episode 580 where there's this strange aura that comes from his attack and so he's momentarily able to stun the dragon that they're fighting, or the most obvious moment where he's able to cut Monet with pure intimidation despite her being a Logia, even without him using any type of armament haki. Like, it's so obvious that even the sound effect that the anime uses during that scene is the same sound effect they use for when Luffy uses his own Conquerors or Kings Haki. Also, Oda has made it pretty clear that Luffy is kind of an echo to both Roger's will and character, and so some of you have already noticed that the same type of connection exists between Zoro and Rayleigh. Like, for example, Rayleigh being Roger's first crew member and right-hand man, Rayleigh having a scar over his eye like Zoro, and ultimately we know that Rayleigh has Haki, King's Haki, so if Oda wants to keep the echo consistent, Zoro should get it too. Not only have people already been shown to be intimidated by Zoro, but he also has one of the most disciplined and hardcore willpowers in the series. Some of the examples that stand out are him being willing to cut off his own legs to continue fighting, which in turn inspires Brogy or Broggy to regain his fighting spirit in Little Garden. Much of the dialogue he has while fighting Mihawk about not backing down is also a great example of this. Him being able to dominate swords that are cursed by overpowering them. Him withstanding an insurmountable amount of pain and damage to protect his own captain and then staying quiet about it. Heck, even his introduction starts off as a showcase of his willpower because he agrees to be tied down for a month in exchange for others not being executed. Plus, there's also that moment in Fishman Island where the crew sees Luffy using King's Haki, and Zoro says that if Luffy couldn't at least do that much, then he would need to step down as captain. Now, personally, I don't want to read too much into that line, but there are some people that take this statement to mean that Zoro has already unlocked King's Haki. Like, he obviously doesn't have full control over it like the way Luffy does, but perhaps he has had random bursts of it already during the time skip training in moments of intense strain or stress.
Another point for Zoro having this type of haki in the future is that if you look at the users who already have it, they typically, actually, everybody with the exception of Kid and Katakuri not so much because he's the son of an emperor, but everybody with the exception of Kid has either a title or an epithet connected to some type of divinity or royalty. Like Roger, who had it, was the king of the pirates. Whitebeard, who had it, was an emperor. Shanks is also an emperor. Kaido is the king of beasts plus an emperor. Doflamingo, who also had it, was known as the heavenly Yaksha or the heavenly demon, right? Boa Hancock, who also has it, is known as an empress. Who else? Sengoku is a golden Buddha. And so I think in that regard, it would be fitting for Zoro to have King's Haki, because as of right now in the story, he's shown that he's able to tame Enma. And Enma is the god of the underworld. And by the way, Enma at first belonged to Odin. Odin was Enma's master. And Odin also had King's Haki. I don't know if you know this or not, but in a recent SBS, Oda kind of confirmed some speculation, some fan speculation that we've had for a while, which is that Zoro's origins or Zoro's lineage can be traced back to Wano. He kind of confirmed it by not confirming it, by saying that he wasn't going to talk about that. He was talking about Shimotsuki Kozaburo and saying that Shimotsuki Kozaburo, who was the swordsman and swordsmith that made Enma and the Wado Ichimonji that belonged to Kuina and now belongs to Zoro, that he came from Wano and he founded Shimotsuki Village in the East Blue. And Shimotsuki Village is, of course, the village where we see Zoro growing up, and that's the place where his master Koshido trained him, and it was also Kuina's hometown. And so Shimotsuki Kozaburo left Wano, founded that village, and then Oda's like, oh, but I'm not going to say anything more because, I might spoil some stuff. So yeah, so it's very, very likely now that Zoro is or can trace his origins back to Wano. And there's a very prominent, well-made theory about him, Zoro, being the son of Shimotsuki Ushimaru, because he looks a lot like him. And if you remember, Shimotsuki Ushimaru was a daimyo, the daimyo of Ringo. And so if Zoro ends up being the son of a daimyo, even though I don't think he would care, but that technically gives him the sort of royal, divine title thing that we see with a lot of users of King's Haki, because the daimyo is a Japanese feudal lord. So yeah, that's the evidence for Zoro showing King's Haki somewhere down the line. In fact, my gut tells me, I have a very strong feeling that we're going to see him use it very, very soon in the story.
Alright, so next is Usopp, who next to Zoro is the most obvious candidate from the Straw Hats to get King's Haki. And a lot of the speculation came from a line that Usopp has in Dressrosa where he's lying to the Tontada at Greenbit. Doflamingo, Fujitora, and Law are fighting outside the underground, and the fight is making everything shake. So Usopp explains to the Tontada that it's his Haki that's causing the rumble.
Of course, we know that one of the things that Oda has going with Usopp is that his lies typically come true within the story, even though they sound extreme when he says them at first.
Now, even with that in mind, I know what some of you may be thinking, like, wait, didn't Usopp awaken Haki? Like, hasn't that lie already come true? Well, he awakened a special type of observation Haki that allows him to see through walls and stuff, right? But the thing is that when he tells the lie to the Tontada, he's saying that his Haki makes things shake, and observation Haki doesn't do that. Only King's Haki does that. Also, like I just mentioned, people that have King's Haki tend to have some sort of title connected to either royalty or divinity, and Usopp actually has two. Not only did he gain the epithet of God during Dressrosa, but even before that, pre-time skip, he adopted the title of Soge King. Sniper King. And this brings me to another quality that sets Usopp apart and connects him to the use of King's Haki, which is the ability that he has to influence and lead others. Like, even before he joins the crew, he has a group of kids that look up to him and follow him around. And his lie about having 8,000 followers is also getting closer to becoming true. Because not only did he gain the admiration of the Tontada, but he also gained respect from the people that he freed from Sugar's ability. So even if he lies and hypes himself up a lot of the time, the fact of the matter is that a lot of people still end up holding him in high regard. And there's really no better evidence to show his ability to inspire others than when his actual words were even capable of inspiring and motivating Luffy to get up and continue to fight Rob Lucci. I mean, if you have the ability to inspire Luffy, that definitely says something about your willpower. Also, in Little Garden, Usopp has a speech about how he wouldn't mind dying alone on an island as a warrior who's led a proud life, and that his final words would be, "I'm Usopp, brave warrior of the sea." It almost sounds like he's describing Whitebeard's death from Marineford. And so it just makes sense that if that's what he fantasizes about, If that's what he's aiming to become, then it must be because the power of the Conqueror lies dormant somewhere within him. It would just really suit his character arc, and I think we're just going to keep getting more and more hints to that effect.
Especially once he gets to Elbaf and he finally gets to meet the warrior giant race that he's been dying to meet ever since Little Garden. We also know that one of Oda's favorite shows that actually inspired him to write One Piece was a show called Vicky the Viking, which was about a young boy who was a Viking who was very sharp, very smart, and very creative, and he would use his wits and imagination to help his fellow Vikings. So maybe Usopp ends up doing something for the Giants, and that ends up hyping him up even more, just like he did with the Tontadas back in Dressrosa. In Elbaf, there has to be some type of monarchy system, or at least some characters that are royalty, because we know that there was a Prince Loki of Elbaf. And so it would not surprise me at all if in Elbaf we run into a character called Thor. And if that's the case, all right, if that's the case, I really think that we should prepare ourselves for Usopp to be revealed as the one true wielder of a very special hammer. Yeah, so I do think Elbaf is going to work to further Usopp's character, just like I think Wano is going to serve to further Zoro's character, just like Whole Cake Island served to further Sanji's character. Now, in order for me to talk about Sanji, I have to talk about Whole Cake Island, but before I get to that, I just want to be really, really upfront and honest and say that I still, to this day, I still have my issues, my problems with the arc. I can list them, literally. Like, number one, I think Katakuri should have been introduced a lot earlier in the arc. I think Bobbins is a total waste, just a complete disappointment in the arc. I think that Sanji's moment of emotional catharsis is very, very similar to Robin's moment of emotional catharsis back in Enies Lobby. I think Chopper is used very poorly in the arc, and he just gets like overshadowed by not only the Straw Hats, but also by Carrot. So he should have had a more important, prominent role. And then finally, I think that Luffy versus Katakuri, that fight should have ended in a draw instead of a declared win for Luffy. That aside though, one of the things that the arc does very well, and it's not just one thing, because the arc does several things well, but one of the things that it does well that relates to the purpose of this video is that it paints a very clear picture in regards to who Sanji is as a person. It's a very clear contrast between who Sanji is as a character versus his power-hungry family.
So in the arc, we learn that the reason that Sanji detests his family is because he was abused by them due to being perceived as the weak link. His father Judge was so obsessed with strength that he was willing to experiment on his unborn children to have them turn out as super soldiers with no emotions. And we know the way he did this was by manipulating this thing called the lineage factor, also called the blueprints of life, which was something that Dr. Vegapunk discovered when him and Judge were colleagues. Now, because Sanji's mom took a special drug while she was pregnant, she managed to allow Sanji to keep his emotions and grow up like a normal human being. By the end of the arc, it's obvious that what Oda's trying to show is that Judge is clearly in the wrong because he doesn't understand what makes somebody truly strong, or what real strength really means. In fact, he ends up getting things so wrong that not only does he get demolished physically, but his life and the life of his super soldier children end up being saved by the one son that he abused and considered to be a weak failure. And so it's this sense of irony coupled with knowing that Oda's endgame in the story is to reach some type of illustration of what world peace would look like that makes me think that Judge not valuing Sanji for being too kind is Oda's way of setting Sanji up for something big. Another thing we know about King's Haki is that the user has to be born with it to have it. You either have it or you don't. It's either part of your DNA or it's not. It's something you have no control over. And so going back to what I said earlier, Judge literally tried to manipulate the lineage factor, the DNA of all four of his sons for them to not have emotions. And yet, out of the four, there was only one exception. Only one of his sons managed to overcome that experiment. And so that right there, Sanji resisting the prenatal manipulation of the lineage factor, pretty much points to there being something special about him dating all the way back to even before he was born. Now, here's the thing. Judge is technically a king. Germa is an actual kingdom, and prior to Whole Cake Island, Germa was recognized by the world government and was allowed to go to Reverie. In fact, we know that Judge's goal is to try to rule over the North Blue, and that at one point, he even took the lives of 4 other kings in his quest for power. So again, since Oda has made it clear that Judge represents the cruel, twisted side of rulership, and since 3 of his 4 sons ended up inheriting that will, I can't see any of them taking care of a kingdom by the end of the series. So by the end of the day, you'll still end up with a kingdom that needs a leader. Now, one of the things that people forget about Sanji's dream about finding the All Blue is that he doesn't just want to find it for the heck of it, alright? He wants to find it because it's the only body of water in the entire world where all the different fish from all the other blues meet. And so as a chef, if he could have that all in one place, he could have the ultimate variety of ingredients, making the All Blue the perfect place for a restaurant.
One of the things that just dawned on me is that Germa is a kingdom with no land, right? It's a seafaring kingdom because it's like it just moves around a lot on the sea. And Baratier also is not on land. And so I think that by the end of the series, there's going to be a combination of the kingdom and the restaurant and have those two together in one place because they both float around and Sanji is connected to both of them. So I'm pretty sure there's going to be an incorporation, a fusion, right, or combination of those two things. And it's going to be like Sanji's home by the end of the series. And it will be near the All Blue. Now think about this. Once Sanji finds the All Blue, and he will, that will technically make him the person who discovered it, right? And so, like, if you look at a history book, people who discover things, they end up getting titles, right? Or they end up getting like privileges in terms of like how to take care of the land or the places that they discover. Back in the day, they were known as conquistadors or conquerors. Conquerors Haki. Okay, that was kind of a stretch. And at the end of the day, look, it doesn't really matter if Sanji ends up being named or becoming the king of the All Blue. What matters is, and this is a fact, but what matters is that he will gain worldwide recognition. Now, the way things stand right now, Sanji's family arc still feels incomplete. I think there was a lack of closure back in Whole Cake Island with them. And I think the reason for why we haven't gotten that yet was 2 reasons. Number one, I think the Vince Smokes are going to come back into the story. Judge has to come back at some point because there's still some unexplored history with him and Caesar and Vegapunk. But even beyond that, Sanji still resists his Germa heritage. The raid suit is a perfect example of this, right? At first he was like, no, I don't want to use this. This reminds me of them. That's not who I am. But by the end of the day, he ends up putting it on anyway. Sanji's resolution as a character is going to come from him embracing both the chef side of him, the Baratier side of him, which, by the way, the word chef literally comes from the word chief. But anyway, I do see Endgame Sanji finally coming to a place where he feels comfortable embracing the Baratier side and the Germa side. And that's when we'll truly see him blossom, just whoosh. And so I think him using King's Haki is going to come down to whether or not he embraces both of those sides. And I think Judge is going to play a very big role in that. In fact, there's already been some speculation about why Judge hides his eyebrows with his helmet. Is it because the eyebrows spiral in the same direction as Sanji's? And that kind of, points towards Sanji being his one rightful heir. Is that what's going on? There's also another theme in the story where we see that Oda is constantly using Luffy to help rulers, become the rulers that they're supposed to be. Like, Luffy helps Vivi out, he helps Shidahoshi. Currently, he's been helping Momonosuke, right? And so if Sanji becomes the king of the All Blue, or something to that effect, I think we could always trace it back to, Luffy believing in Sanji. Because Oda loves making Luffy look good. And speaking of Luffy, if you look at Roger's crew, we know that at the very least, there were at least 4 characters aboard Roger's ship that could use King's Haki, right? Roger himself, Rayleigh, Odin, who joined Roger because Roger inspired him. Roger's will inspired Odin to join. and then Shanks. Now, Shanks was very young, right? But ultimately, he had King's Haki within him. So that's a total of 4 members within one crew. At least 4 members, right? That we know of, right? 4 members. And so it's important to remember that Luffy's goal is to not be exactly like Roger, but to surpass Roger, right? So with that in mind, I don't think it's too crazy to say that Luffy will have at least 4 members of his crew, himself included, that will have King's Haki.
One last thing I want to mention here is the obvious man in the iron mask scene that we see during Sanji's flashback. According to the rumors surrounding the actual story, the man in the mask was actually King Louis XIV's identical twin brother, and he was imprisoned so that the two brothers wouldn't dispute their claims to the throne. And while I don't think that Sanji would be too interested in being called the King of the All Blue, or King of anything for that matter, at the end of the day there will be a need for someone to supervise and oversee that newly discovered body of water. You know, just to make sure that it's being taken care of properly. And so I don't think there would be a better person for that job than the one who set sail with the dream of discovering it someday. I think we can all agree that Sanji is essentially destined to make a pretty big name for himself by the end of the series. And like Rayleigh said himself, people who are the biggest names are often the ones that have King's Haki.
I just imagine a couple of panels of the ending of the series being at a bar where a couple of friends are drinking, and one of them says, "Hey, have you guys heard the story of how Zoro became the world's greatest swordsman lately? Let me tell you about it." And then one of them says, "No, no, no. What about the story about Usopp, the brave warrior?" And then the last one says, "Or the story about Sanji, the king of the all blue." And then it's going to be revealed that Luffy is in the same room with them, eating some meat. And so Luffy turns to them and says, "Yes, please tell me about them." So hold on tight, guys, because I'm telling you, we're going to see some kinks. That's going to do it for me, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Please share your thoughts about the points that I raised in the video down below. Like if you liked it. That's fine if you don't. Subscribe if you haven't already. I always say that. Please stay safe. Focus on the things that you can control instead of the things that are outside of your control. Take care. I'll see you guys later. Bye.